Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. A very happy Monday to everybody out there. Jake will be back with us before the end of the week. We're rolling solo today. Let's welcome in our next guest, though, as we continue to bounce around the NFL, get some previews on the big teams, including the big teams with big local players. We'll start today with the Buffalo Bills. Katherine Fitzgerald. You can read her coverage of the Buffalo News. You can also find her on Twitter at KFitz134. It's Katherine Fitzgerald. Hey, Katherine.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Well, let's start with the biggest local name. We'll touch on a couple, but the biggest local name, of course, is Dalton Kincaid. When you invest a first-round draft pick, specifically in a tight end and a pass-catching tight end, I think the expectations have to be through the roof. Been some ups and downs for Dalton Kincaid. What's been the grades so far on that pick, and how are fans feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, there have been some ups and downs. Obviously, he was working through. Oh, I think he just passed me on a scooter, actually. I'm talking from outside Bill's training camp where the players stay in the dorms here and the media stay in the dorms as well. So you get to see guys going to and from lunch. But like you said, there's been some ups and downs for him. Working through that knee injury last year that we didn't know the extent of really until the end of the season. Obviously, he was on the injury report with it. But didn't know how bad it was. So, that puts things in a little more perspective. But I think anytime, when you've got a team with Josh Allen and you give him a potential weapon like that, you want to see some highlight reel plays. End of the season was a little hard for Kincaid. He's been very open about that. But I think people are looking to see him bounce back a bit this year after dealing with some of those injuries. And he's looked good so far in camp. He had a really strong camp last year as well. So it's good to see him getting back into the groove of things.
The big drop was huge against Kansas City. That's on fourth down on a catchable ball. That was a big play. How is he going to bounce back? Because we saw him. I mean, he didn't drop anything here at Utah, hence being a first-round pick. But he battled through a lot. He was not a big recruit. He was not a big transfer, and he obviously developed into a star at the college football level. How do you expect him to bounce back from that?
Yeah, I think it starts with kind of that mental aspect of the bounce back, and he's been really strong in that. There were teammates telling him to take accountability for it, and he did. He talked after the game, putting it all on himself, and I think that's where it starts culture-wise for this team of him stepping up and being like, no, that's on me. I've got to make these plays. But you see his rapport with Josh Allen is really strong, and I think Josh is going to go to him time and time again. Kincaid wants those big moments, and I think, recognizing what happened, but still, demanding those plays, that's what you want to see in one of your playmakers.
As we know, the NFL stands for not for long. What type of a leash does he have? How long will Buffalo continue to invest in him?
I think he's got a pretty long leash. This team saw a lot of him in college. Brandon Beane has spoken so highly of him time and time again. Obviously, they do want to see a little bit more out of him, but I think they've been candid with him about that of, we want a little more out of you, but we trust you. We think you can work through that, and that's why we're being hard on you because we care about you is kind of the vibe they're giving off. So I think there's still a lot of trust in Dalton Kincaid.
And then another local player who was maybe one of the most underappreciated players to come from our state is Taron Johnson, who has been a staple on the defense for the Buffalo Bills this year. And we'll talk about the defense in a moment because obviously it's the big question mark. But how has he played and what type of a player has he been during what's now nearly a 10-year career in Buffalo?
I know. It's been incredible to see just what he's done over that span. He's such a pillar of this defense. There's been some turnover on the defense, especially in the secondary the last stretch. But I think just there's so much trust in Taron and what he's able to do. We see him being more and more of a vocal leader. I think that's been really big of him growing into that a bit after, there were a lot of veterans on this defense for a long time. And in the last year, 2 years, it's shifted a bit. And he's taken on that leadership role on top of making plays. And maybe that's where it starts. Other guys see his example on the field and they want to emulate that. And they go to Taron to see kind of like, what are you doing that I can, put myself in these positions as well? super friendly guy, celebrates his birthday at training camp every year. But I think it's just been fun to see him kind of take that next step in the behind-the-scenes aspect of being a leader on this team.
Not the level of defense last year from Buffalo that we've seen, and still they were so close to getting to the big game. What is changing this offseason on the defensive side of the ball, and what's the expectation there?
Yeah, I think, Brandon Beane, their general manager, is always talking about how it starts up front, and they've revamped their defensive line a good bit. It's going to take a bit to see exactly what that looks like. They brought in Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi, both of whom will miss the first 6 games of the season with suspension. So it's a little interesting to have 2 guys that are new to the system who are going to miss time. That they brought in rookies as well through the draft. So it's, they're refiguring out some things on the defensive line especially. But I don't think we'll fully get a taste of that until, honestly, those guys come back week 7. It's still going to take some time for them to rebuild some of that chemistry with their teammates. But the Bills feel confident in their plan for those guys missing time and getting reacclimated. So we're going to see how that plays out.
Big expectations for Joey Bosa?
I think so. I mean, they brought him in for a reason. He obviously has an injury history and has been dealing with that some here as well. Missed a little bit of time in the spring during, I believe it was the end of OTAs and mini camp, but he's been, had some vet rest days here, but still they've been working him in, trying to get him to be a part of it. I don't think they want to put too much on his plate, but they want him to be involved in this defense for sure. So I think they think he still has some juice. I think it's been a refreshing new chapter for him. He's talked to us about how much he's loved the way they run training camp here. And, to have a veteran guy say he's enjoying training camp when it can wear and tear on guys is always important. So I think he's a little rejuvenated now that he's back out there. But, it's going to take an entire team for that defense to come together.
Katherine Fitzgerald joins us. We're breaking down the Buffalo Bills. They are so familiar to fans in the state of Utah, not because of the names on the team, but they are going through something right now, and they obviously did in the early 90s as well, that the Utah Jazz went through in the late 90s, which is you are very obviously the second best team.
Yeah.
And the one team in front of you has Michael Jordan, or the one team in front of you has the superstar, and obviously that's Mahomes here. So how have they discussed or handled or resisted, or maybe they haven't resisted, trying to reform themselves to just beat the one team? Because that's a trap. They are playing extraordinarily well. They are doing basically everything right. There just happens to be one other team out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see it in how they form their roster. Going back a few years, this is a less relevant example now, but I think it illustrates the point. When they brought in Von Miller a few years ago, Brandon Beane openly was like, we need him to be a closer. When it comes to playoff games against Kansas City, we still need a closer. We haven't had that on the defensive line, and we are shaping our roster this way to counter them. Now, they can't do everything just to counter Kansas City because you also have, your Baltimore's, you look around the AFC, it's stacked. So you can't just react to Kansas City. But I think you do see some of that flavoring of the team of they know who's knocking them out year after year, and they need to respond to that. On an individual player level, I think, Josh Allen has talked about it a lot of candidly kind of saying he's sick of it still being a topic. But the only way to get people to stop talking about it is to finally knock them out. And so they still need that win to kind of erase this narrative or move on from this narrative, rather, that they can't beat Kansas City. Because until you do it in the playoffs, it doesn't matter.
Is that what it feels like right now, even in camp, that this is purely about the playoffs and purely about one potential matchup?
No, that's a great question. But I think they do a good job of, during camp and everything, really staying in the moment of knowing, they set goals as benchmarks on the way to that ultimate goal of we want to win our division. We want to have home field advantage, stuff like that. It's not fully built around Kansas City, but I think that still lingers a little. I mean, we're asking about it, obviously. But I think within meetings, within practices, within, just the moment-to-moment nature of this, they're focusing on kind of what can we do to be the best version of ourselves right now and that will ultimately lead us to that goal.
I love it. My co-host, who's not here today, hates it, but I get excited for Hard Knocks every year. Has it changed anything about what you've sensed at practice so far?
No, not really. I was curious to see how it would play out. They've got a huge crew here. You know, there's been, I want to say, like 37 members from the Hard Knocks crew here on some days.
Wow.
So they're around for sure, but I think the team's done a really good job of just kind of focusing on what's going on. It will be interesting now that there's a little drama with James Cook and his desire for a contract extension to see if that changes any of the nature of camp when there's extra cameras here. That just started yesterday, so it's still a little early to say. But I think so far, you know, every now and then a guy will ham it up for the camera, but there's not too much of a distraction, if that makes sense.
What's the confidence in the running game?
In the running game? Well, right now it's a little chaotic. I think, honestly, just this offense as a whole is dealing with so many injuries. They're not too much at running back right now, so that's good. But I think we're all kind of in a waiting game to see what goes on with this James Cook hold-in. He has been, you know, here at camp present but not participating since yesterday. He began the hold-in 8 days into camp, which is unusual. But when he's on the field, you know, and when you have that dual threat in Josh Allen, they've really built this running game up over the last few years. And I think that continuity on the offensive line, bringing back all their starters, bringing back depth guys has been so important just as they, you know, continue to run that ball.
We did set a world record for talking about the Buffalo Bills in the year 2025 without bringing up Josh Allen for the first 12 minutes of the interview. So I'm going to pat us on the back, but it would be silly to not talk about him. Where he is, you know, he's truly in the elite class of NFL quarterbacks. He's top 2, top 3 at absolute worst. Is there an expectation that he needs to do more? Is that even reasonable, or is this the player that Buffalo has and everyone else needs to step up?
I mean, I think it depends on who you're asking, because if you ask Josh directly, he is always trying to do more. He's trying to turn over every stone to find a little more in his game, and that's coming off winning MVP. You know, when we talked to him the first day of camp, he got into some of the things he's still working on, but just stressing over and over that until they win it all, there's more he can do. I don't know that's exactly how his teammates feel, his coaches feel. I think they know the caliber of play he has, just his ability to make plays happen out of nowhere. So I don't think there's like external expectations on him of we need you to do more, but I think he's so internally motivated that he's raising that level.
Does it feel like they're still ascending as a team? Does it feel like Buffalo's still getting better, or is there a fear that if this doesn't happen and they don't break through in the next year, if maybe this year, and if not next year, that they could start to age a little bit? They could lose that open championship window?
You know, it's a good question. I think their team belief is as long as they have Josh Allen, that window is open. Now you look at some of the makeup of the rest of the team, guys are going to be, you know, they're not going to be able to keep everyone year after year. We've seen turnover here and in years that they thought they really had it all. So I don't know that it's like this year or nothing. But I do agree that when you have Josh Allen, you know, you're always giving yourself a chance. But I think the longer they go without really making it all the way, it puts more pressure on the coaching staff and the GM, I would say. Saturday
morning our time, Saturday afternoon your time, they take on the Giants. What are you watching for in the first preseason game?
Oh, well, it's, you know, what's so interesting, I mentioned injuries before. I'm interested to see who steps up. You know, they're so banged up at wide receiver right now. Guys are getting reps with Josh Allen that you wouldn't usually expect. Now, I don't think Allen's going to play this weekend, but I think just for anyone who's able to get a chance on the field, wide receiver especially, it's such a critical position, and they're missing multiple starters right now. I believe they just got Joshua Palmer back today off the top of my head, but I think they were without 4 of their wide receivers today. Khalil Shakir is such an important player for this offense, and he's going to miss multiple weeks. So that's where I'm looking to see who steps up there.
You mentioned, what was it, all but one pick in the first 6 rounds was defense? I mean, that's got to be the focus, right?
Yes. You know, whether they say it or not, they want to build this defense back up and just kind of give them the chance in big games. again, they know what Josh Allen can do. Obviously, it didn't work out this past year, and that kind of fell on the offense of not being able to sustain that last drive. But I think they still need their defense to step up in the playoffs a little bit more, and they're trying to get creative with it. You know, they brought in some new coaches as well for the defensive staff. Like I mentioned earlier, kind of revamp that defensive line. They've got young guys in the secondary. So they're trying everything they can just to, I don't know, really tighten down that defense and make the most of what this team can be.
Katherine, who's the biggest threat in the AFC East? Outside of Buffalo. Who's the biggest threat in the AFC East outside of Buffalo?
Oh, that's a good question.
It's not a murderer's row.
Yeah.
We're being honest.
I don't know. I don't really trust these other teams in the AFC East right now, to be honest. I think that's why I'm having a hard time picking them. When we look around, they just, they feel like they're all still a few years behind. I don't trust the Dolphins. I feel like maybe they're the closest, but I don't. There's something about the way they just always kind of seem to fall apart a bit to me. So
Yep.
I don't know. I'll have to think about that.
And the Jets are the Jets, and the Patriots haven't been good for a decade now, it feels like.
Exactly. So, it's a messy division.
hey, Katherine, really great stuff. Enjoy the rest of camp. I'm sorry you probably have to watch Hard Knocks and aggregate it and don't just get to watch it and enjoy it like the rest of us. But good luck.
The 9 p.m. start time is tough, but, we'll see how it goes.
Find her on Twitter at KFitz134. You can read her in the Buffalo News. Great stuff, Katherine. Thanks.
Thank you.
There she is, Katherine Fitzgerald, giving us a breakdown on the Buffalo Bills, one of the teams that I told you I've sold my stock on, but remains a true contender in the NFL. And while we talk about their championship window potentially closing, that just might be what they have to do with the Bill or with the Chiefs. Unfortunately, it's just hope that at some point Travis Kelce's no longer what he was, and he's not, and Mahomes maybe doesn't have the weapons around him to be the guy, but. We thought last year would be the year that he wouldn't have the weapons around him, and he still found a way to make the big plays when they needed to get to the Super Bowl, where they were promptly trounced by the Eagles.
I saw an interesting stat that no coach and quarterback duo has ever won a Super Bowl after being together for 5 years and not winning a Super Bowl.
And not winning.
McDermott and Josh Allen are going into their 8th season together.
It's like if you can't do it, you can't. You already know you can't do it. Man, who would be? It's like McNabb and Andy Reid. I'm thinking of like quarterbacks that would be in that conversation that were very close and were very good, and head coaches that were very good and found a way to do it. I didn't ask about it. It's kind of tough, and I should have. Does McDermott, if they don't win it this year, is McDermott the thing they change?
It's hard because
he's good.
Clearly he is a good enough coach.
He's a really good coach, yeah.
But it's just at some point it's like you got to make changes, and if you don't try at least a head coaching change, but then you don't want to get worse. For as good of a head coach as he is, the possibility is very real that if you go somewhere else, you get much worse, and that hurts. That's
the gambit. But, you look at Tampa Bay, and they get Tom Brady. Now, it helps, and they add Bruce Arians, or I think it was the other way around, but Bruce Arians wasn't there. Was it 3 years? He won a Super Bowl his second year. Like, having guys who know how to do it, not that he'd won a Super Bowl before, but like, getting that guy, getting that experienced coach to break through can be the difference sometimes. And I'd be curious where they would look. Bill Belichick, I'd be curious where they would look, but I don't think it would be Bill. But maybe if Bill wants to get back into coaching, he'd be interested in going to Buffalo. He certainly dominated that division before. Really good stuff from Katherine. Thanks to her for jumping on and giving us some really good stuff on the Buffalo Bills, who are one of the most interesting teams in the NFL this year, hence starring on Hard Knocks beginning tomorrow, which I'm excited to watch. All right, we'll wrap up the show coming up next. Stick around. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.